What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap second video today because I want to get this video out before tomorrow's OTA. We're going to go over the top 4 from today's community gaming tournament, and there might be some changes tomorrow, so I want to give you guys an opportunity to play with these decks exactly as the competitors in this event did. And in first place, we have Taiki Twist with Blob Thanos, and this is a deck that you've had plenty of time to play with in basically this exact same configuration. This deck also kind of got first place last week, just with one change. Hope Summers over Kyera, with Taiki now playing Kyera in that slot, but it is a deck that everybody here is super familiar with. Blob Thanos, let's move along because we've got some sweeter decks. So moving on to the second place list, this one actually does have Hope Summers in it and Cannonball, and it is also a Blob Thanos list, but it's trying out something new here with Ravonna Renslayer. Now, Ravonna seems pretty weird in this deck with only 2 cards that it's making a little bit cheaper. Psylocke, sure, it's definitely doing something there, giving you a cheaper Psylocke, but the main thing that I think Ravonna is doing is giving you a turn 4 Professor to set you up for a turn 5 Cannonball that could potentially have more opportunities to lock your opponents out of the game. So that curve is kind of interesting. Typically we see Cannonball on the final turn of the game, though Professor X plus Cannonball followed by Eliath potentially has some interesting play lines to it. I'm not sure, and I'm curious if we'll see this trio of Ravonna, Professor, Cannonball going forward in the future. But let's move along here. We've got another interesting take on Thanos here from ChewDog99, and this is a Destroy Thanos. So we've got Killmonger to blow up some of our stones, as well as Gladiator and Nico, which do destroy cards from time to time. Nico's draw 2 cards ability is generally the best mode that you can play on Nico, and you're using all of these to cheat out a cheap death as really your only payoff card. You're playing both Mockingbird and Death, so you kind of want to go Mockingbird and then Killmonger and then Death, but it's really cool if you can pull off those lines, and then Scar is also able to capitalize both on Death and on Wave. But the big card here is Red Hulk, being the newest card added to the game along with Baron Zemo this week. No Baron Zemo in this top 4, but we do see Red Hulk here make a 3rd place appearance, and I think a lot of the buzz around this card is it is pretty good, and it's pretty good specifically kind of like as a blob replacement, just a big card that you play on turn 6 and it wins you the lane that you were losing, and you spend the rest of the game trying to put as much power into those other 2 lanes and then allow your opponent, like whichever lane your opponent is committing the most to, you just don't play to that location and then slam a Red Skull down there on the final turn of the game to flip down that location, and that can undo the work of like a Ghost Rider into Infinite or some other really, really huge potential plays from your opponent. I'm really curious to see if Red Skull or Blob will ultimately land on top, because with Gladiator, Mockingbird, Death, and Scar, this is definitely a list that looks like it could also incorporate Blob. However, Wave plus Red Skull is much less risky and gives away much less information than Wave plus Blob, which tells your opponent what you don't have in your deck and therefore don't have in your hand anymore as well, and can potentially deny you some draws sometimes, though that's not typically a huge deal in Blob Thanos. And then moving on, this was actually not the sweetest deck of the week. I think that honor is going to go to 4th place here, which is Nymuel. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name, but this list is kind of wacky. This list is kind of wild. I've reached out to Nymuel because they are also a content creator, and they said that this was a viewer submitted deck list that they decided to run in this event, and they've been just really having a lot of fun with both Cannonball and Dr. Octopus being another way that Doc Ock to lock your opponent out of one location and fill up some space for your opponent's cannonball. Maybe cannonball's on the rise. A lot of people are playing Brood. Baron Zemo also fills some locations up a little bit more. Honestly, this deck kind of feels a little bit all over the place, and I do want to remind you that it was an open decklist tournament. So even a card like Heimdall, which is a cool card that can kind of like surprise some opponents, it's not really doing that here because every single one of Namuel's opponents knew that Heimdall was at least in the list. But now with Heimdall being a 6/9, it's a little bit nicer. It's got a little bit nicer stats to be able to just throw in your deck and be more powerful. And I think that's like the main conclusion of this deck and the previous deck that we looked at a little bit as well. Though more this deck, which is like almost zero synergy, right? It does have some synergy with Gladiator, Black Widow, and Cable kind of denying draws, but almost in an opposite way, because Gladiator and Cable, if you're going to deny a draw from them on like the final turn of the game, you kind of undo that with the Black Widow. It's almost like a Darkhawk deck. No, it's not really. No, I don't know what I'm saying, but there's a little bit of a disruptive package here. And then the other thing that we see is a few cards with interesting drawbacks. Maximus Gladiator, potentially Dr. Octopus, paired with this Zero, which is not a card that we typically see played outside of Shori Sauron, but it is pretty good. I brought it up in my video that I released earlier today as a counter for Baron Zemo, and here we are seeing it to pretty good use, just kind of in like a good stuff deck. And it's a 1/3 that you can pair with a 2/6 or a 3/8, so all of that seems pretty fantastic. The Gladiator can be a little bit risky, of course, with some of these bigger cards. You don't want to pull out the Red Hulk. That would be really, really disastrous. But this looks like a lot of fun and is a totally different take from anything that I've seen recently. Now, it does need Cannonball in order to play this exact list that Namuel is rocking here, but I'm kind of curious in trying this out. Let me know if you're going to try out any of these decks as well. And for today, that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.